Welcome to RoadTex, an Echo company. We're a nationwide leader in temperature-controlled LTL transportation and warehousing services spanning the entire shipping lifecycle. Matter of fact, we're one of the only temperature-controlled providers with food-grade warehouses that offer retail consolidation solutions. Leveraging our advanced technology and extensive network, we simplify shipping for clients.
Welcome to the Stockout. We'll call this the Stockout Mexico edition. We're going to be interviewing Troy Ryley, president of Echo Global Logistics of Mexico operations. So excited about that. Grace, do you have much experience with Mexico in your prior life in brokerage?
Yeah, a lot of our brokerage actually did a lot of oversized loads. So there was a lot of those type of projects, especially over the last couple of years, where the focus was, of course, building infrastructure and a lot of the, I think, nearshoring efforts as well. So, not only the fun of cross-border just in general, but cross-border with permits, et cetera, gets even more interesting. So it was a good time for sure.
Yeah, always a hot topic in transportation, always a hot topic with the railroads. The railroads, intermodal companies really doing a lot of partnerships that go north-south these days to extend their capabilities into Mexico. My prior life, I followed some of the rail car manufacturers. Most of the rail cars are manufactured in Mexico, kind of ideal location for that because they're big, bulky things, not easily they can offshore those. So we're going to learn about Mexico today and maybe give a little bit of some thoughts on 2025 following State of Freight, which was, I think, still going to be relevant after this show airs. Before we do that, I want to make sure everyone has an opportunity to sign up for the Stockout newsletter. You can do that at www.freightwaves.com/the Stockout. Up at the top under newsletters, under supply chains, first one there because it's the best one, the Stockout. We now send this out at a scheduled time, which is normally 2 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesday, which is a departure from sending it out whenever it was ready, which was what I was doing. Also want to encourage people to go to our conference, which is going to take place November 19th through 21st. So that's going to be the very first week prior to Thanksgiving. Stone Temple Pilots is going to be there. Lots of great content. Lots of speakers from Echo. Also a couple sessions where my former colleague John Larkin is going to be on. He always very opinionated. Looking forward to the debate about whether there is or is not a driver shortage. I know his views are that there is a driver shortage. That paying drivers a little bit more is not going to cause accountants to put down their beloved Excel spreadsheets and go out and drive a truck. So always good to hear from him. And then we just had the State of Freight for October. Grace, you have an opportunity to listen to that?
Yeah, I did. And it's, it's interesting because I was currently at a conference, industry conference as well. And a lot of the chatter between brokerages there too is mimicking a lot of what we saw at the State of Freight or heard at the State of Freight too. So it sounds like we should be able to smile a little bit more in 2025, which is good to hear. And of course, we've got going into a month, right? When this airs, we'll be going right into election season, which is always a good time here in the U.S. as well. And we'll see, how those predictions work out as well with that too.
Yeah, regardless of what happens in the election, half the country is going to be upset about it. But whoever wins, there's really all this political capital that's been built up, and there's this big push to, in the first 100 days, get something done. Might be a little bit more impactful to the freight market if Trump wins, because it's going to be tax cuts in addition to this social spending, but clearly there's going to be a lot of spending, a lot of action. Regardless, you add that to declining interest rate environment, the push to get products into the country before tariffs is a big deal. Whether the 60% threat on tariffs for Chinese imports is hyperbole or not. I mean, there are going to be additional tariffs, it seems, if Trump were to win. So big push there. And then, the capacity side, capacity continuing to come out of the market. We're starting to see some additional evidence of the market being more sensitive to certain disruptions. Like we have sonar chart on van outbound tender rejections and reefer tender rejections. And the reefers really did move quite a lot in response to the hurricanes in Florida, going from about 8% up to about 13 or 14%. They've since settled in at 12.7%. So still seeing an impact as of the time we're recording this. But the dry van hasn't had the same impact, but still certainly off of its lows and starting to get more sensitive to certain things like strong seasonal times, like June, typically strong seasonal month. And we're starting to see that in rejections responding to that, and starting to hear more from carriers. When J.B. Hunt reported their earnings, said that they're seeing a return to normal seasonality, and they're ones that really deals a lot in seasonality, given just the seasonal nature of intermodal shipments that tends to peak in October. And I thought J.B. Hunt was fairly positive on pricing going into 2025. I mean, one of the big questions I get is, what is intermodal pricing, the contract rate's going to do when this current round of contracts roll over? And J.B. Hunt, I thought, sounded pretty constructive there, saying, we were providing a good service. We have the capacity to handle even when there are surge, needs, including seasonal surges. So it sounded to me like the implication was that their thought is that now the contract rates are going to be up. Do you take anything away from earnings season so far? I know it's pretty early as recording this.
Yeah, from what we've heard so far, around the same sentiment. Again, to kind of to take a step and more focus, I guess, from my perspective, a little bit of the brokerage side of things. Again, talking with a number of brokers this week, I'm hearing positivity about volumes that they're seeing currently, or at least a slight increase than what they've seen in the past. So that does get me excited for what we're going to see going into 2025. I think most people, right, as we always kind of say, the first couple months is still going to be a little bit slow, but going hopefully into that spring, we'll see an increase there as well. And then, when it comes to, of course, the election season and that aspect, the one thing that does make me nervous, just because we saw a little bit of it with the transition into the Biden administration, for example, kind of the gridlock that we saw internally within the party and even pushing the infrastructure plan. There's a chance that we see maybe some internal opposition to some of the Trump administration's goals. But again, I think if a Republican can take over the Senate and have the same party across the board there, I wouldn't be surprised for them to see and take full advantage of that too. So I think there are still a little bit of questions, of course, that transition into a different administration, as there are. And of course, we've heard about some disruption within the party as well, and maybe the power that you see a little bit more in Congress, at least holding that power. So, but again, taking a little bit of a glass half full stance on that one, maybe just to make a little bit of an argument. But yeah, I'm hearing in terms of earnings so far pretty much the same as what we're hearing from JB as it's just started to turn out this past week.
Yeah, always reluctant to make any predictions when it comes to elections. It's like the last.
You just never know, like
so far off of anything that anyone was expecting.
I would rather make freight related assumptions at this point in the United States than any type of political assumptions. You just pulling I guess a magic trick, right? You have no idea what's going to happen sometimes. But I do think that, of course, if the Republicans take over the Senate and the House, that's going to be some interesting gameplay for administration change as well.
Yeah, sounds good. We have better data on the freight market anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So why don't we intro today's guest?
Yeah, excited, of course, as we've, of course, thank you to Echo. I've been a guest on the show numerous times, talk about one of our last events. Of course, you and I got to sit down with their team as well. And we've got for our audience today, Troy Ryley, president of Echo Global Logistics, the Mexico division as well, like we said earlier. So, Troy, thank you for joining us. Excited to get a little bit into your Mexico offerings.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I want to dive right into this, and exactly, of course, we're seeing more and more cross-border freight, including the technology and the operations behind this as well. I'm interested from your perspective, what attracted you to Echo in particular, and why was it important for you to join the Mexico operations and start to build that out specifically?
But I'm kind of following the path of my career, actually. I've been doing Mexico logistics for about 30 years now. I started actually pre-NAFTA, before the original NAFTA
Yep.
agreement was signed in 1994. I had actually just graduated from grad school, and my area of expertise and studies was Latin America and obviously North America as far as Mexico was concerned. So it was my first job out of school. I've always been interested in the area. Echo is a great company. Obviously, it has a extraordinary amount of buying power and capability and technology. And they had a program in Mexico, but it wasn't to the extent that it could potentially have been developed. So we're taking this base truck brokerage model and we're actually turning it into an integrated logistics model to meet our clients' needs, and it's being very, very well received. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, could you expand upon that a little bit? You're turning into an integrated logistics model. Sort of, what does that mean exactly? Sort of, what were Echo's capabilities before joining? Where do you hope to take it?
Well, I think, first of all, I'll start with the reason why. I mean, most clients have the same issue. They get started with an operation in Mexico, and then they realize very quickly it's not anything similar to what we do domestically. We call it the famous black hole at the border. You have U.S. trucker, Mexican trucker, crossing agents, U.S. customs broker, Mexican customs broker, a lot of elements to the equation. And if you, as a strategic partner with your client, can come and solve a lot of those problems and also have single party accountability, it creates tremendous value for the client. So again, our initial efforts are our core competence, which is our truck brokerage service, but we're in the process of launching several other products. We now have a warehouse distribution service capability in Laredo, Texas. We're adding not a arm's length U.S. Mexican customs brokerage operation, but will actually become part of the Echo core offering. And we have other capabilities that we're going to be adding here and we'll announce soon that make a big difference in how we handle our current clients' business and our capabilities over time.
Yeah, I'm interested for those listening or watching now who, have just moved things domestically, haven't gotten into more of this cross-border trade in particular. Could you maybe elaborate on some of those challenges you listed and how you're able to work through those with the, of course, relationships that Echo has built and clearly the facilities and operations that go along with that as well?
Well, I think one of the things that clients face all the time, there's never the one consistency with Mexico is inconsistency. So the second you have it nailed, there's a hurricane that hits and it wipes out the road between Monterey and Laredo, Texas, right? The main artery of transportation. That's a true story. A couple weekends ago, I don't know if it was caused by the hurricane, but whatever, the Mexican customs facilities blew down, the inspection docks. You have strikes at the border that block bridges. So what a client needs is a company that's able to offer not just regular day-to-day service, but contingency planning, and a strategic partner that's able to shift and be flexible and build flexibility into the supply chain as these dynamics not may occur, but will occur. I've seen them historically always occur over time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you need 3PL to help you manage these exceptions, which maybe arise more frequently in Mexico than you'd be accustomed to in the U.S. Another risk that sort of strikes me is anything sort of related to security. We talk a lot on FreightWaves about freight fraud. Is that sort of an issue in Mexico as well? And how do you help shippers with that?
I think it is, and I'm going to take a twist on that answer because everybody looks for their logistics company to solve the problem of crime in Mexico, or fraud or whatever occurs. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do uh, as you work through the aspects of CTPAT, uh, their program. It's a great starting point for serious companies that are going to work to help their clients actually avoid some of these issues, but it's not a bulletproof plan. When I tell people you can put GPS units on, you can have security vehicles follow your freight, you can do 1,000 things. The bad guys have jammers. The bad guys will always bring more guns. The bad guys will do all kinds of things in order to ensure that one way or another they're going to get your freight. So your only safety net in that particular case is purchasing cargo insurance. And as you're probably aware, Mexico operates different than the United States as far as truck insurance is concerned. In Mexico, it's very similar to how we look at ocean freight or air freight. There's a limit to liability. It's actually very, very low as far as the Mexican government is concerned. I've actually never seen it paid. So you don't want to go into Mexico without protecting yourself against potential fraud and issues or theft. And insurance is the best way to do it. We actually have a partner, Reliance Partners, who handles our insurance. Obviously, we have preferential rates for our clients, and they're able to add that service to their ECHO program.
Yeah, it's definitely a risky environment, and happy to see that you've made that relationship with Reliance as well, and excited to see how they improve and offerings in that space too over time. And one area in particular that we've actually touched on this show quite frequently, of course, is the tariffs that we're seeing on Chinese products. Now, we're also noticing is that, of course, people are essentially starting to zone skip, bring products into Mexico and cross into the United States that way in order to avoid some of that as well. Have you seen that on your end? And with that being said, how does that change the landscape of cross-border freight in your offerings as well?
Well, I think in my opinion, right? This is not the company's view, but my view. The China situation, China's causing some of its own issue as they continue to dump rocks in the South China Sea and claim more territory and build islands with military bases and threaten Taiwan. You have U.S. companies that are planning and trying to limit their overall exposure as far as risk. And when they look at those dynamics, they say, well, we can't 100% source out of China. So what are we going to do? How do we diversify our risk? And you're seeing this in general. There's a trend towards regionalization of production. I think COVID taught us a very, very valuable lesson. The longer your supply chain, the more risk you have. And it creates an inability for you to forecast effectively. By moving your production closer to home, it's creating a tremendous advantage for you. And obviously, it's a region we know we can protect, and it's not going to have variations based on political climate. China's seeing this; they realize it, and their only entry is through the back door. They're a major producer of cars right now in the Mexican marketplace. They are working as quickly as they can to try to establish themselves in the market, so that even if the amount of trade with China decreases over time, they still have access to U.S. markets through Mexico.
Yeah, that I think most people are seeing that and sort of expecting that. I also want to ask you, what shipper segments or sort of what verticals do you see as being the greatest growth areas in Mexico? Like, where does it make sense to have more nearshoring, put that in Mexico instead of maybe in East Asia? I know it's had a huge impact on like the automotive industry, but any other sectors that you really see growing, based on your conversations with customers?
I think there's very few, or I can't think of an auto manufacturer that's not operating in Mexico today. And I think the CPG firms are really locating there, white goods, really across the board by creating a supply chain that, if, say you're in Monterrey, Mexico, you're 2-3 hours away from the U.S. border, you're 24 to 72 hours away from the majority of the consumers in the United States, you have a huge strategic advantage in general. So I wouldn't say it's one sector at all. I would say it's multiple sectors. Obviously, the Maquiladora program is very, very advantageous to production in Mexico in general, as far as the taxation is concerned. So I wouldn't focus in on one particular industry per se. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Another question I wanted to ask is, I've been doing more research into kind of the regulations that we see with cross-border trade between Mexico. And I know that they're hoping to go through a number of, I'd say, technology updates, right, when it comes to the paperwork and the overall cross-border operation. What does that mean for Echo and for your work that you're doing? Is this something that excites you? Do you think it's going to make cross-border trade easier? Do you think it's going to be like, as any technology adoption, a hiccup period where it's just going to be mass chaos? What do you see in the future of where Mexico is trying to update kind of their systems and cross-border trade?
Well, I'm going to be candid again. Recently, they put the Mexican military in charge of the ports and customs in both of the borders and ocean ports. I don't think they're strategic enough in thinking or forward thinking enough to really get on top of the amount of growth that's going to be necessary and technology changes and efficiencies that need to be created in order to keep up with the growth that we're seeing today, especially in markets like Monterrey. And you realize about 70% of the new companies are entering the Monterrey market. Infrastructure beyond just ports and customs and technology, enough electricity, enough water, enough people. We're seeing signs of inflation on personnel costs in that market based on the limited amount of talent there is in order to meet the needs of these new setup factories that are coming into play. So again, the new technology, they may do some things. There have been things done. You go to U.S. Customs on the northbound, there's actually a Mexico revision station inside of U.S. Customs that's kind of a pilot trial program that they're beginning to roll out in other ports where they're inspecting things once. They're opening the trailer once on the U.S. side. If it were red lighted on the export in Mexico, it can go to that location, and both the U.S. and Mexico can review it at the same time. So again, there are some areas of opportunity. I think they've been slow coming, and I'm not necessarily optimistic that the Mexican military is going to be the key to the solution in being the dynamic group that's going to create the next level of technology for Mexico Customs.
Interesting.
Makes a lot of sense. A lot to consider there. Also, want to ask you, how do you view the competitive dynamic between the Southern California ports, supporters of LA Long Beach, versus Lázaro Cárdenas, sort of on the west coast of Mexico? Do you view that as a sort of a viable alternative for shippers to get imports into, let's say, the inland consumption centers like a Chicago or Dallas?
That was the old Kansas City Southern model. They were trying to convince people to go over the ports when we had the LA strikes, Long Beach strikes. The problem is, in Mexican law, the concept of inbound movements is really not well defined. In the United States, we have ITs, T&Es, all kinds of different mechanisms to move freight into interior ports for clearance or across the United States. A transportation and export entry where you could go from Long Beach, for example, to Laredo and then import into Mexico without paying duties and taxes in the United States. They're really not set up well to do it. The premise of the program was it was less distance. For example, if you went to Lázaro Cárdenas or Manzanillo, you could put it on a train. It was going to get to the Houston market faster because the distance is less. That's great. The only thing they're not taking into factor is the train runs slower. So there wasn't any time gain in it. There really wasn't any financial gain in it. And I don't know of companies that are using that model today. Now, if we ever got in trouble in the U.S. ports, God forbid we have another Long Beach strike or whatever we're seeing already on the East Coast, that's entirely feasible. That is a contingency plan. I wouldn't say first route of import opportunity, but a contingency plan for some companies based on the program that the rail has set up.
Interesting stuff. Well, unfortunately, we're running out of time, but I want people to know exactly, of course, how to reach out to you to learn more about your Mexico offerings. What's the best way to reach you if they're looking to hear more?
Yeah, that's fantastic. And thank you again for the time and the invite to join you at the interview. You can always reach us at first place, go to our page, www.echo.com. And I think from there, you can get reference on any of our Mexico materials or any of the other services that we offer within the company. We'd love to hear from any clients or anybody listening. If we have anything that we can add or any specific questions you have, please do contact us.
I love that. And again, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a great conversation, and hoping to see you and the team at F3. And for our audience as well, of course, make sure you go to live.freightwaves.com after this and check out, of course, our F3 event coming here in pretty much a month from now. Of course, we have a wonderful discount code for you, F3 Stockout 24, and it's a very good discount. So go check that out as well. Head to our newsletters page, click on the Stockout, and join our community there so you get Mike's email every week as well. And until then, we'll talk to you all next week.